Hello everyone, welcome to our third episode of Closing the Loop. I'm Kiri from Ananas. For this episode, we're thrilled to welcome our friend and teacher Rico Zook. For the last 23 years, Rico's worked as a permaculture consultant, an educator and designer. He's traveled around the world teaching all levels of our global community on how to create culturally and ecologically appropriate systems that are therefore also regenerative and resilient. And we at Ananas have very close ties to Rico. 5 members of our team have done permaculture design courses with him. I did my first permaculture design course with him in 2014. And both Himanshu and I, who are speaking to him today, have done teacher training courses with him and Jude Hobbs. So since 2015, he's basically been a mentor figure to us. He always puts aside time to guide us in our work, and we always look forward to him coming through town so we can catch up over a beer and get some of his inputs on what we're up to. Today, we're going to be talking to him about his work as a teacher, and about permaculture as a useful tool in response to the pandemic, as well as a useful tool in response to other challenges that face us as a global community. So hope you enjoy.
Hey, Rico.
Hello, India.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm so glad we could make this happen.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I don't get many visitors out here, so it's nice to have you guys visiting.
Yeah, so how have you been? Tell us a bit about where you are, what you're up to.
I'm on the island of Molokai'i, which is one of the Hawaiian islands. There's 4 main islands, and this is the 5th sort of in terms of population, and it's a minor island. There's only about 2 minor islands, and we're the bigger of the small 2. And so I'm East End, which is the wet side, so we'll see if we might get, it's been raining the last 24 hours off and on, because it's tropical ocean. So from this direction, generally like that, we get the clouds coming over. So we might get a rain shower coming through, which, grab the computer, run back under camp. And we're sitting in my garden. You can see I made a fence out of strawberry guava. Being a itinerant permaculturalist, I don't make a lot of money, so I can't throw money at things like wire fencing. So I have lots of strawberry guava as sort of the dominant weed tree, which it's a great weed tree to have. Very good wood, great little guavas, small red ones about that size. That's why it's called strawberry guava, I guess. So anyway, I made a fence out of a bunch because we're on my top terrace. I have 2 acres here and about 1 acre in old Hawaiian terraces. These terraces might be, we don't know, but minimum, they're about 300-400 years old, most likely at the minimum. They could be up to 800, just really don't know. Built by the native Hawaiians who were here. Yeah, and so this is my little camp. This is my land, and we're really remote. It's a 4-wheel drive, dirt road to get back in here in a little valley. We're surrounded by a 14,000 acre ranch. So there's 3 other parcels. There's myself and 3 other parcels, and that's it in this little valley. And then just thousands of acres of wilderness around us, ranch, but it's mostly wilderness. So that's, like I said, I don't get many guests out here, so it's great to have you out. So that's where I'm at. And we're sitting in my little garden that I'm getting going here.
So how have the last 3 months been for you? Because obviously there's been a lot of changes in the world, and
there have been, and I'm curious to see what it's like when I go back out from here. For me, it's about the same. I mean, on the island, Hawaii, in terms of the United States, which has the largest number, and is kind of messed up, in my opinion, in the way that it was approached by my government. But be that as it may, Hawaii has been low, and in terms of per capita, we've been one of the lowest states, not the lowest, but in the low, like 10 out of the 50, or low, like we're the 6th or 7th lowest. And on the island here, which is 7,500 people, we've only had 2 cases. And those happened about the same time, and that was a month ago or so. So the island itself, we're pretty, not affected that much by it. We're doing the distancing. Everybody has masks in town. Town's been open basically. And out here, I mean, I'm by myself besides my buddies. Occasionally we'll get hunters come through, you know, and we chat, you know, keep our little distance, friendly. So for me, life hasn't changed that much, really. You know, I'm kind of unaffected by it, except when I go into town. So it has, however, just the other day, I have my yearly schedule, and I was scheduled to fly out to Europe, to France, to do a course in August. But we've been waiting to see what's happened, this and that. And so just the other day, we made the decision to have me not do it. And the organizers have found a French woman to do the course in terms of instructor. So so that's the first real impact on my work, is that probably I'm not going to go to Europe. I have that course in August, then I always go to my buddy Romans, great guy. He's been stuck in the Philippines this whole time. He was working over in the Philippines. He's been there for the past several months. But anyway, in September, I usually do an internship there in Spain. But since I've canceled myself, the course in France is still going on, different local instructor, which is great. But it's impacted me that way. I think I'm going to skip Europe this year. And hopefully everything in India is fine for me to come there in October. That's my hope.
Okay.
So that's sort of how it's affected me, minimally, but we'll see.
I was just wondering, do you grow your own food, Rico, or do you get it from outside? And I hope it's not been a problem for people to come in and so on.
The food here, Americans are kind of reactive, so there's been a run on the food. So I am getting my food as I usually do. I mean, I'm getting my garden going, but it takes a while to get it going. When I got here, I had to set up camp. I had to get things ready. So, the garden didn't get in. Had to get the fence up because we have wild deer. We have the Himalayan barking deer, as you guys know, which is a story I won't share here. But we have an Indian, the Himalayan barking deer, which is a pest here in terms of they'll eat everything. So that's one reason the fence up. We also have feral pig, wild pig. So I'm hoping to start to get some food out of the garden, maybe within a month. We'll see. So my hope is to get the veggies there. But I do mail order food. There's a lot of food here you can get through the mail order in terms of my basics like grains and bean pulses. And I like condiments, things like that. So those I've been ordering and getting on the mail because the island's pretty expensive. Hawaii's expensive, compared to India, the United States is expensive. In the United States, Hawaii is expensive. In Hawaii, Molokai'i is expensive. So I have several layers of expense. So I order my food through the mail, and then I buy fresh veggies in town when we go in. We used to go in once a week, but now we go in every 2 weeks. And so I'll buy my veggies. So yeah, I'm still relying on the system basically for my food. But plans are I'll be growing rice here. Might take a year or two. Next year when I come back, I might try to pick up some rice seed in India. So I might try some rice next year. And I have some pulses growing, but they'll probably won't be ready by the time I leave. We'll see now that I'm delaying it. So eventually, of course, this will become a farm. That's my plan. But, slowly, especially with my travel. So yeah, so I'm still hooked in.
So just on the subject of gardening and growing your own food, I've also been just thinking about this, and we've been discussing this amongst ourselves with the changes that have happened with Corona and things. On the one hand, it feels like people are kind of waking up a bit more to the need to grow their own food and become more self-reliant. Maybe there's going to be more localization. I also see that there's more produce being sold directly from farmers and things like that. Maybe CSA programs will pick up. On the other hand, sometimes it also appears like people might be quite afraid or want to sort of kick back into the gear that they were in before this all started, and maybe there'd be more dependence on these larger systems. So what do you think? Do you have any sense at the moment of how you think things are going? And how?
Oh man, predicting human behavior, forget it. I mean, it's just what's going to happen after. That's the big mystery. We're going this, as you guys have probably heard me say before, I always have felt a pandemic would be a turning point for the human population. And I think this is the first. So I do believe potentially there will be shifting, and there will be on some level. Definitely with the people in control and power, there'll definitely be shifting there. As for the whole human culture, I hope there will be. And that's all I can say really, because I don't really want to predict. I mean, we have two things. We basically, and especially in the United States, we have two concurrent sort of potentialities or scenarios happening. One is this sort of the fear-based xenophobia, United States, guns, locking down, control, and all that. At the same time, as you see in Europe, which is one of my, I'm very much in terms of my culture, I'm more of a, I'm European and all that. So I identify quite well with the Europeans. I'm American, but my heritage is European. That there's this resurgence of realizing that security is about knowing your neighbor, about connection to local systems, because the global systems are stressed through this pandemic. So there is a strong potentiality for that. As in permaculture, what we talk a lot about the importance of resiliency being based in locality, in local systems. So that potentiality is also going along with this other sort of fear-based, contraction of, and this one of control. So my hope is that there'll be a resurgence of that. And I know there will be. There definitely will be more local things happening. There will be a segment of the population that will focus on getting to know their neighbors, of buying more local, about developing local systems, and that. I just hope it's enough. That there's enough of a move in that way to really have fundamental change in the way of security. Because true security is about community. It's not about individual possessions. It's about communal solidarity, about communal systems, about local systems, and that. So what will happen, I don't know. It's, as the Chinese say, as the old Chinese curse is, may you live in interesting times. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens as we go into this new reality, as we create this new reality. There'll be the move of control, and there'll be the move to more of local resiliency, local resurgence. And we'll just see which one of those really becomes the more of the significant one.
Right. Have you started seeing this happening in Hawaii, where you live right now? Is it, are people becoming more self-reliant? Are there signs of this?
Of course, I'm isolated, and we've been isolated, so I haven't directly been able to see that. My good buddy Hunter, there's a gentleman, Hunter Hevelin, who's a permaculture guy, but he's getting his doctorate in geography. Really cool guy. I've done some teaching with him. Hopefully, since now I'm not leaving so early, we're supposed to do a course over on Oahu, which is where Honolulu is. That's where he lives. It's a big thing. Big 80% of the Hawaiian population lives on Oahu, skyscrapers in Honolulu, all that. That's where he's based. He's really, in terms of his work, is a lot about, food hubs, about farm to school, farm to table, doing all this foodscapes. That's what he's been working on a lot. And so with this whole pandemic and the whole thing, we've spoken a little bit, he's been working on that a lot. So definitely through just my connection to him and hearing it, that's there. And in Hawaii, the local when I say local, that's the native population, as you guys would say, is a lot about aloha, which is sort of like it's not namaste, but it's aloha is like about the heart, and it's about caring, when use it as a greeting, and you like, that's why it's sort of like namaste, as a greeting and a departure, you sort of say it, and it's a very heartfelt thing. And so Hawaii is very a lot about the aloha. So the traditional culture here, the native culture here, is a lot like that. So it's just inherent, and especially in Molokai. Molokai is the most Hawaiian island of the Hawaiian Islands, because over 50% of the population here identify as Hawaiian, and that's the most of any of the islands, because the native population was decimated here with disease, the classic Western story of colonization. So Molokai is the most that way in terms of the tradition. So it's sort of like that's already here. So I couldn't discern it from one from the other, It's for me, in my experience here. I think on Oahu and with my buddy Hunter, that's there as much as I've seen it in Europe, but how much I couldn't say.
So, I mean, if there is this developing shift also hopefully towards more community action and localization and people coming together to create change for themselves, it's also a field obviously that we're navigating. We work in with community gardens and doing whole systems design for people and permaculture design. But one thing that's happening at the moment as well is that there's this increasing social distancing and sort of navigating how communities even come together. And a lot of what we're doing, and we've been doing for the last 3 months and might go on for longer, is that we're in this sort of digital realm. And so how does this kind of work, and what do you really think of this sort of digital realm of sharing information and sharing knowledge with each other and creating community in this way? And how to navigate that over the coming months.
Yeah, it's like so much life that it's both good and bad. There's the two sides to it, and that's very much true with sort of your question. And that's just the reality we live in. It's never cut and dry or one way or the other. It's usually a combination. I mean, the digital realm is great for connecting. I think, there's a lot of benefit we've seen from this technology, However, we're human. We need to connect, This is technology. This is not reality. This is a thing. It's a tool, and we confuse this tool with, like hugging someone. And to me, and this is where it gets into control. If you want to get into conspiracy, if you want to get, is there an ulterior motive? Is there all this other stuff with this pandemic? Because there's this whole, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but to me, the thing I have my sadness around, potential sadness, the thing I hope does not happen, is this human to human touch, and being able to go up to someone and say, hey, and stand in a, like just person to person, physically, see them and do that. And so, while I think this is great, and I think, it's, and I, that this technology has good aspects to it and it has benefits to it, it is not reality though. It's not this physical world. It's the classic thing I have with this idea of virtual reality and people getting into this virtual world and playing their whole games. And I'm just like, yeah, that's all right, but it's not, it's not this, what does this sound like? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little woo-woo here, and all that, but it's just like, what's the sound of touching the leaves and hearing the leaves crunch? And it's not, you can't, this is not, in the virtual reality, it's like, that's not it. Even if they totally replicate it, you could put on glasses and you could walk in this world where you do this, and I pick this up and I crunch it, and it's all like my mind thinks it's the same. No matter how, even though my mind thinks it's the same, and some people will argue, therefore it is the same, it's fucking not. because no matter what we do in digital reality, it'll never be this leaf. Even if we see this leaf, even if I were to take off, like even if I could not perceive this as different in the virtual reality to this, it doesn't change that it is different. That virtual reality will never be this leaf, even if I think I can't distinguish between them. So I'm sorry I'm getting a little about it. But to me, I think one of the melees of our reality, of our world, is this disconnect between humans and the physical world. I think a lot of the issues we have today is because people don't have that connection to physical reality. They don't understand where their food comes from. They don't understand where their shit goes to. They don't, they don't get it. And so for me, that's in terms of this whole social distancing and all that, I think that's important. We have to manage this pandemic. We have to sort of, be aware. We have to take care of each other. So I'm not, I understand that. At the same time, we cannot lose what it means to be human. And to me, that is, to be human is to walk on this earth. It's to connect to other humans. It's to be part of this fabric of life that we are inherently embedded in, and we can't get away from it. So, it's that's the thing we have to figure out. That's the thing we have to work with, is as countries start to open up, as we sort of go into, easing the lockdown, we have to balance the importance of managing, not getting resurgence of infections and stuff. At the same time, we have to embrace being human. We have to reconnect physically with each other, or emotionally with each other. And you need to do it person to person, not mediated by this. So that's, I didn't really answer it, but that's my thoughts, This is great, but it's only a substitute. It's not the thing itself.
So that's also something that we can kind of, also with the work that we do in designing for landscapes and working with communities, is really encourage people a bit to get out there. I mean, not to get too sucked down into this whole realm that's so easy now. I mean, a lot of technology makes it very simple for us to carry on in this way, do workshops and things in this way, which is valuable, but also to remember that nothing can really compare to actually being in a garden together and growing things together, touching the soil. And so that's something that...
We're having little raindrops come down.
Uh-oh.
Getting little sprinkles here. That's why I looked up. I think it'll be okay. That's interesting. I mean, just because, I'm in my little reality here, which is not really in the work of, my own little permaculture here or whatever. But I haven't, in terms of design, it's really interesting what you say about this idea of, as designers and as we're designing landscapes, there's this whole new layer now we have to think about in terms of social distancing, of creating intimacy, but also being aware of the potentials for that. It's just interesting, that's what I love about being a designer, is that there's so many potential layers, and these different ways and all these different aspects that we're trying to create through this harmonious integration of all these other, sometimes there's constraints, sometimes there's potentialities, and just really, I hadn't thought till just this conversation about that, how this new layer of this question of creating that coming together of people, but now with the awareness of this distancing, this physical distancing that we'll have to be aware of, at least for the coming bit. And the thing of it is, this won't be the last pandemic. This is to me, I think we're pretty fortunate to have this, which is a weird thing to say, because in terms of a pandemic, this is not like Ebola. This is not where 80% of the people die. This is where, it's a little bit more severe than other flus, from what I understand, but it's still, depending which demographic you're in, old or underlying conditions and all that. But, it averages around 1 to 3% of the people who get it will die, unless you're in one of the more, you're old or you have these other serious complications. That's not, that's not a high percentage. So this pandemic for us as a species is sort of fortunate in a way, because now we have this opportunity to figure things out. It's not like we have this whole Ebola where it's like, if you get it, if you survive, it's not going to be pleasant. And, 80% of the people are going to die. 90% of the people are going to die. So this is not the last one, unless we're inshallah, which I really hope, if in the dreams and, the perfect reality of my little head, when we come out of this, we really get smart and we start changing the way we've been dealing with the planet. This pandemic is the beginning of the planet saying we need to balance this out, and you guys are being a little bit of a disease. The planet we live in. That's why I say this, when I say this digital reality is only a minor reflection of this huge complexity of life on the planet. When we look at the planet and the whole system of life on the planet and all the other systems that are, interlinked with this thing we call life, the water cycles and the geologic processes and the weather pattern, all this whole complexity, we're the disease on it. We're the ones who are messing up the system, in terms of, depletion of biodiversity, of altering patterns, weather patterns, of water cycles, of all this stuff. And these pandemics are just the way of this complex, huge system reacting to try to reestablish a balance, because it's having this little sort of virus that we call humanity, So this is not the last pandemic unless we really radically change.
It's interesting that you say that this is not the last pandemic.
No.
I mean, and you also teach permaculture. How do you adapt to the many more pandemics that are going to come? And how do you start teaching, and how do you start fitting into that realm of all of this?
Well, it's one of those complex, sort of duality thing, I was mentioning earlier. Because I firmly believe you can't make anybody do anything. It's just like you can't teach nobody nothing, as we might say here. And so my hope in my teaching is to point to how we're messing up. That's one of the things. Look, this is what we're doing. This is what humans have been, this outcome of this sort of consumerist, capitalistic-based system in terms of overconsumption, of depletion of resources, of loss of biodiversity, on and on and on, of all these things, and that we have to stop that. So one of the things I encourage people strongly to do is become aware of their personal impacts. Then from there, it's more of the positive actions, what can you do locally, is you have to start with yourself. You can't be out there doing things with people if you're not doing it yourself. So the great story about Gandhi and the child and sugar and all that, which you guys probably know. So with my teaching, it's basically just trying to get people to think. I'll try to show them the situation. I try to hold up a picture as accurate to reality as possible, because I have my biases, I have my opinions and all that. At the same time, I try to say, okay, this is the reality as best as I can explain it from my own bias and opinions and all that, and try to get them to see it. That's why I say this is just one thing. It's like one of the things you have to do as a human is we have to know what is, where are we? And so that's one thing I try to do. Then the next thing is like, what do we need to do? In terms of like, create diversity, in terms of, those whole the principles of permaculture and all that, give them tools, give them understanding, give them ways to go, and then just help them. Hopefully they can figure out what to do. as you know, one of the big things that, so I try to hold, to put it certain points, there's certain things I try to do in my courses. One is just to say, here, this is reality, you know, in terms of as best as I can, say, this is the situation we're in. The second thing I try to do is say, this is how our system works as best as I can. It's more complex and there's so many subtleties. So it's just the beginning points. You know, nature creates from a point, you know, and that's the, you know, start small and expand, you know, the way we link it into our principles. You know, and I try to point to ways in which, how does life work? How do our systems work? You know, help them understand how things work. And then I just try to get them to help them think, you know, critical thinking. Like, you know, you'll have people like me telling you, here's what is, and they have to have the tools to be able to figure out what they think is right and what they think is a bunch of bullshit. You know, so that's the third thing, is trying to get and encourage and provide tools and practice, because as you guys know, you've been in my courses, of like dialogue. And if you guys disagree with me, it's like, tell me so. Or if you have your thoughts, tell me, and then we can have a discussion. And hopefully through this dynamic, we can come to a deeper understanding of what might actually be. So that's sort of like, is like, hold up and say, this is our reality. This is how our reality works. And then friggin' think, you know, how do we think? How do we process? And then what to do? You know, it's like, and that's what I say at the end of each class, each course, I should say, it's like, just do something, you know, go home, figure it out, and take a step, you know. So that's my basic, what I try to do with the courses, be it a 2-day, 3-day introduction, or be it the full, you know, 2-week, or I'm actually thinking of doing a 1-month one here on my land, you know, full design course.
So permaculture is one way we can, because I mean, if we think about the pandemic being the result primarily of us disconnecting ourselves from nature and interfering a lot with the systems that are supporting us.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like dialogue as a tool, and I've also heard you talk about permaculture as like a toolkit that you carry around with you. I mean, there are other things besides permaculture and other ways, other lenses through which one can view things, or the systems one can use. But since you do teach permaculture, and that's also what we use in our work, are there more tools you think that we can, are there any specific tools that come up for you that permaculture has to offer to help us in this, you know, maybe prevent future pandemics, bring us closer to nature, or make us kind of, interact in a way that's more beneficial to us and to the natural world around us?
Yeah, well, so yeah, there's different ways to do it. And permaculture is just a tool. It's more of the whole, or it's the tool bag, let's say. It's, you know, it's just one way of organizing all your tools and utilizing all your tools. So talking on a tool level, that's sort of the idea of swales and you know, in terms of designing paths and the way you put things together and planting, and those are various sort of tools. And permaculture is this larger thing of organizing the bigger flows and all that stuff. So for me, the thing of permaculture itself, the gems of permaculture, let's put it that way. And again, permaculture is not the way, it's a way, and it's a functional, good way to do it. However, it's a way that takes skill. It's not like you take a 2-week course and then you can go out and, you know, start throwing it around, like, you know, throw your permaculture around, sling it around. It takes practice, and it takes knowledge, and it takes subtlety, and it takes practice. Anyway, the gems of permaculture are the whole thing, like the principles. I love the permaculture principles, because those are just, you know, they're the how to do something. You know, permaculture, one thing we emphasize, it's ethical. Care for earth, care for people, fair share. Fine, you know, so those, you know, if you want to do something, or you're trying to decide, like, you know, if you're in private practice, you know, like you guys are, Ananas, is if the client says, I want to do this, one thing you guys do immediately is sort of like, the very first thing is like, can we do this so we're taking care of the earth, or it's, that it's fair share, or that it's these other things, And if you say, yeah, I think that's possible, and, care for earth, care for people, fair share, yeah, sure, we can do that. Then the principles become ways in which you figure out how to do it. Ethics are yes or no, and the principles are how. So that to me is one of the gems. And also as you sort of open up the principles, catch and store energy in the high in the landscape. Why is that? And you understand, and you try to figure out, why do we do that? It starts small. Why do we start small? And you figure that out, is that these principles lead you to different truths in terms of the way things fall. So to me, that's a gem, is the permaculture principles. The other thing is that it's all about this idea of regenerativeness. And as you guys know, I like to make my little sayings, the Ricoisms, as someone once said. And my classic, the one that got me on this path of my little sayings, is that permaculture at its best is subversive, right? And to me, subversion, when I use that word, is causing change. The hand of change, the thing that's causing the change, is unseen. It's underneath. You don't see it. Change is happening, but you don't see what's causing the change. And that, to me, is the ideal of permaculture, is that as a designer, when I design things, and it takes a while, as you know, it's not like you install permaculture, you have to grow it. And so it evolves. A design evolves in the sense of its growth, and it's, this and that and blah, blah, blah. That permaculture is subversive is, in a sense, I'm going to forget what I was about to say there and go to this about the person, is that if you really as you do permaculture, as you understand it, as you unfold the principles, as you start applying these things, you start getting to deeper realities. You start getting to sort of fold back about how this thing works, and that in itself is a pathway. It's not a spiritual pathway. It's a personal growth pathway. You can call it whatever you want. And that to me is the ultimate beauty of that subversion, is that permaculture will change you, because as you do it, you evolve yourself you evolve as a human, because you come to understand the deeper linkings. You start to understand how this thing over here is actually influencing and linked to that thing over there. And that those two linking together actually are part of this larger thing. Other thing that's going through is causing to affect that, so therefore that. And then you're just sort of lost in the whole, web of this amazing thing we call life. And to me, that's what, your question.
Permaculture is a toolkit that we can use, and a lot of it is based on observation and understanding what's happening around you and understanding these relationships. And I want, sometimes there are certain things that a lot of the issues that we're facing are things because of us sort of taking large actions, and sometimes, even in permaculture, if you do a design and then you have to implement that design, there are certain sort of larger actions that you take. For example, you mentioned swales, so you're digging these earthworks, you're digging ponds, which is something that I'm doing right now. And that sometimes can be, you can get a little unsettled by that. You think like, God, there's this whole complex web of relationships out there. And the more you observe, the more you see like the tiny, there's a little spider that goes on this, and all of those relationships. And so how would you, as a teacher and a practitioner, how do you navigate that realm of action and allowing things to unfold on their own? And how, it's a question that I'm sitting with at the moment.
Yeah, it sort of gets back into that, permaculture is subversive and how it affects us, its influence on us as we practice the art and science of permaculture. It's one of the things, and this is, again, gets back to how it affects us in the skill-based and how you evolve as a designer, as a permaculturalist, and therefore as a human, is the ability to navigate these various levels we work on, because we work in a complex, layered reality. Our reality is not simple. It's a huge complexity. And as designers, as permaculturalists, as humans interacting with our world, the better we are at navigating the levels consciously, then the more effective we can be, you know, in terms of making better choices, and the more our actions can result in the outcomes we're working towards. So in terms of as a designer, and that's where I say you don't take a two-week course and go out and take on, you know, a 100-acre farm with all these complexities. You know, you have to work your way up through it. So it's a matter of practice. It's a matter of observation, reflection, trying this, reflection, trying that, reflection, observation. It's this continuous evolving process, you know, as you move down this pathway of learning and growing and getting better at what you're doing. So there's no like, how do you do it? I can't answer that other than you walk the path. You start small, you start simple, you do something, you see what happens, you take the next step. As you take those next steps, you're able to do the thing you did a little better. As you do that thing a little better, you're able to add in the next layer. You're adding, you say, okay, here's a swale. I've done the swale. Oh, look how it catches. Oh, it broke there. Why did it break there? Oh, okay, I fixed it. Now it's working. Oh, look how it's going down. Oh, I got that then. And now you're looking at how the water gradient, you know, how it's infiltrating water. So now you've sort of figured out the swale. Now you're seeing how the water is infiltrating. You're getting dry spots, you're getting wetter spots, and now you're laying your planting on it with your gilding on top of your earthworks. And you're going, okay, yeah, that's how that's working. The swales I've gotten because now there's this planting and here's this. Oh, now we're having pests. Okay, how are we managing the pests? We have our swales. Oh, we have more water over here because of that. So this pests are here. So now, see, so you're layering and layering and layering and you're doing it. It starts simple, right? And that's how, again, we understand, we mimic how nature works. Nature creates something simple, right? It's this duality again, that this complexity of life is built upon basic, simple truths. Nature takes a thing and it's pretty simple, and then she starts layering other things on top of it that are sort of simple, and then they start layering on top of each other and interacting. You have all these simple stuff all of a sudden creating this huge complexity, right? It's complexity based and evolving out of simplicity. That's how we model our growth as permaculturalists. Is we start simple, we figure things out, we get the earthworks going, then we get the planting going, then we figure out how to do the fencing, then we have our little camp, and then we watch how the deer react, and we slowly build up and get into these larger complexities. And it's just a pathway each individual has to walk and do themselves. You know, you're not going to be given it in a course. What we do in the course is we try to help you understand, here's what's going on, here's the reality we're in, here's some basic truths and ways in which we interact with this reality, and there you go, sort of thing. You know, and here's how you think, you know, observation, how do you, you know, critical thinking, you know, reflective, conversations, you know, and that, so it's like, here we are, here's how that works, here's how to think about it. Right, and you know, figure things out.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's interesting you say that. What about people who don't have access to land and who are also permaculturists and who are also practicing? How do they deal with a situation like this in the current scenario?
And that's, you'll have to forgive me. I am obviously land-based, and that's where my love is and stuff. So, and permaculture came out of the land-based. So a lot of it's biased that way, and I apologize for that, because what we're really talking is about systems, and, you know, systems as regenerative, which you guys can, in your introduction or something, explain that word. So all this I'm talking about can be applied in earth, I mean, it's all earth-based. That's the thing, you know, the city is as much the earth as this place I'm sitting in right now here on this remote east end of Molokai'i. You know, it's just that the earth is much more human-scaped. You know, it's just much more of a, you know, human-built environment. So the earth is much more covered up, but it's still the same. Nature still behaves the same way in the city as it behaves here in the wild. It's just that what's there and what's going on there, you have to adapt that situation and work with that. So, and the human layers, well, of course, in permaculture, we call the invisible layers, become much more of them are there. More influences are there. You know, it's a lot more political, it's social, it's a lot more rules and regulations. It's a lot more, you know, you do a little thing here, you know, you're in an apartment complex, you do something on the roof, all these other people who are going to get, you know, involved in it, potentially have opinions about it. So it just, you have to navigate a lot more of the human landscape, you know, the human created landscape, both what we call invisible, social, cultural, political, and all that, as well as just all the hard things, the cements and that. But you still start small, figure things out, you know, get things going. Then other layers come in, you work with that. And if, you know, and don't try to do too much at once, you know, start simple. And if it's, let's say you're living in an apartment and it's sort of, you have this little society apartment where, you know, then, you know, you work on your terrace. You figure out pots and soil and, you know, what bugs and the solar access and all these different things for your little terrace. And how can we go three-dimensional? How can I increase my edge? How can I get more production off this area? And then perhaps, let's say you deal with, oh, there's all this organic, you know, you want to do, let's say a roof terrace, you know, grow some food on the roof, up on the roof. And so you start talking to people. You know, there's this whole, as you guys know, the whole layer of social permaculture, and there's some good resources out there learn about social permaculture. So you start small, you know, start talking to some neighbors, start checking out the roof. Maybe, you know, if everyone's okay, put a couple plants up there and see if anyone reacts, you know, like put a pot or two up there and see what, if someone says, hey, what are you doing up there? Or, you know, if there's nothing, and then, you know, if it grows a little bit, and see if someone pilfers it, you know, and who pilfered it, you know. And so you just start, same thing, you're applying the same principles. Start small and simple, start high in the landscape, you know, all this stuff. It's the same, it's just a different, and it's still physical, it's still nature. It's just dominated by the human imposed on top of the nature. Is that answering your question in some way, I hope?
Yeah, it is. Because I remember in one of your courses, you were saying that you like a city when you're flying over it, and you see that green, and all the roofs are covered with trees and plants. So it's
that's my dream. That's my dream. Yeah. And I think one of the potential benefits of this pandemic, and the thing that's happening, is people are getting reconnected, like, oh God, where's my food come from? And I think a lot of people are doing that. So like here in the States, it's like getting seeds or sort of hard, you know, there's certain businesses that collapsed during this because of they were, you know, like restaurants and other things are having hard times. But there's other businesses that are just booming, like seeds, you know, the seed companies are just going through the roof, you know, and so, and so, you know, so I think we're, and that's the thing, as permaculture people, we talk about leverage points, and leverage points are just physical, but they exist in time, you know, and we're coming up to we're at a potential leverage point time-wise, and that when is the right time to, like, you know, like push, and what to push at what time. And this whole idea of greening the cities and getting food, we're at a leverage point. You know, and as people start coming out, it's the time. That's why I'm saying potentially you guys, me, all of us in this business where we're teaching people this stuff, there's going to be a lot more interest, right? And my hope is that there are courses there in India and in the United States and all that, that will have more people want to come. Just talking about my dream of flying over a city and seeing just green with some little roofs and towers sticking up above it. I think we're at a way where we can push that dream, you know, coming out of this, that this pandemic is an opportunity for pushing that.
You had mentioned that there are certain businesses that are flourishing, like seed businesses and things like that, because of the pandemic. and also thinking about cities and like human, the human realm. And basically, finance and business and money basically determines a lot of what goes on in the way that we interact with the world. And so we've also been thinking, and since we're talking about permaculture and regenerative systems, we've been thinking more about regenerative economics and sort of how one can apply this kind of, and exploring how the sort of the marriage between business and economics and ecological living. And sometimes they seem to be at odds with each other. And do you have, what do you think about that?
Well, more and more, I think the ills we're facing is an outcome of our capitalistic consumer society. And the basic thing is that our economic model is messed up. I shared with you, that other podcast, which I don't know if they're around anymore, the whole, extra environmentalist podcast. And I'm listening to their past podcasts while I'm working out here doing different things, and they've talked a lot about that. And I've already been aware of this. And, excuse me, there are a lot of buggies out here in the jungle. That basically, and that's interesting, I've been looking, one of my projects now with this, the organization One Earth, where we did that course for Sanjana, was that they're starting a school there and helping design the invisible structure of the school right now. And one of the things I want to embed in there is an economics department. It's about outdoors and about, permaculture and about, different things like that, and healing. And I want to get economics in there, because that's really, I don't think as a society we're really going to change till we change our economic model. The economic model is based on growth and consumption, right? The dominant one. There's others around and that. So in my research and others, there's what's called ecological economics. And there is actually one, and it's one of the partners of one of my mentors, Ben. He's actually one of the board members involved in this whole organization that has now created the thing called regenerative economics. So to me, the whole capitalistic system and the economics in which it's based is the flaw of the system. And if we change that, I think everything else would change. It would be a huge ripple effect. And we're, especially strongly in the West, we're taught that our wealth, the money we make, how much we make, and all that is a reflection of our worth. And that if you're poor, then you're just not that, you're not making it. That unless you have this a certain economic income level, if you're poor, then there's something wrong with you. So I'm sorry I get off on that, but that's more and more I'm realizing that is such the issue. I've always known that, but it's just becoming more and more sort of intense for me, this reality of how much our consumption, it's capitalism and consumption, the idea of, and the idea of growth. Our economics, the dominant economics is based upon the idea that it has to grow. It's not growing, then it's not working. And we get these bubbles and we get these bursts and we get these downturns and we get this suffering, resulting suffering of humans because of that. People lose their homes, people lose their jobs because of these economic cycles we go through.
Right. So Rico, you mentioned about, so are there any examples for these vibrant regenerative economies that you're inspired by?
Okay, well, specifically, I don't have necessarily a place saying, oh, this here. I started to say it was a lot about local, and that's true. A lot of these different people that I've been listening to that have been on this podcast, they're guests that they talk to, they often reference Mondragon, which I may have mentioned at the end when we talk about co-ops. But it's not so much a place, it's more of tools again. Like cooperatives are amazing things. And Mondragon, it's like Mondragon, M-O-N, dragon. Dragon, Mondragon, but it's Basque country, North Spain. They're one of the sort of famous cooperatives around. Here we go. There we go. That's a little better. Just trying to readjust now while I have protect my technology. I think it's fine. Stop sprinkling. Yeah, and the whole thing, transition towns, transition movement, which you guys have heard of. So they're doing an amazing thing, local, which one of their things is about local currencies. That's an amazing thing. I think Bangalore would be an amazing place for someone to go through and look at the idea of local currency in Bangalore. It'd be ideal. And there's a lot of resources out there for that. The whole idea of LETS, local economic and trade system, that means different things. And again, there's more on that, where you set up these, person-to-person interactions with resources and services and things like that. So one of that gives me hope and also frustration is my solid belief that we don't need, with all the challenges we're facing in the world today, all the issues in terms of, loss of biodiversity, thinking about food, about our water, about the weather, about this, about that, climate change, blah, 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 is that we don't need to learn anything more. We don't need any new technology. We can deal with everything, all the challenge we're facing now with all the knowledge we have and all off-the-shelf technology. We don't need to invent anything new, and we don't need to figure anything out. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't keep figuring things out. Definitely we should try to learn more. That's always the case. But we don't need to learn more to know what to do. We know what to do, and we have the technology to do it. And that's sort of like this. It's like, we know there's these better economic models. We know what we can do about carbon sequestering. We have so much we can do with that. So this whole question about, shifting the economic model, it's more of just getting humans, it's like the hardest thing to do is to change human behavior. Right? That's the challenge we face in our world today, is changing human behavior. And on a mass scale, we have to do it so that all of humanity does it. And that's why I say, if it's not so much like we have to go change every person, what we have to do is make some fundamental, leverage points. And I think this idea is local economies, and again, this idea of a leverage point in time, that we're at this, as we come out of this pandemic, this is a time we can really start instilling some change, potentially. That would then start one of the ripple effects, or they're coming out of that, would be the motivation of people to do things differently, to act differently.
So you've been, for the last, I think, 16 years, you've had a permaculture design course, so you've been teaching in Darjeeling.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's the longest in Asia, no? Yeah. And
yeah.
You're working with an NGO, the DLR Prerna.
Yes.
And could you talk a little bit about, because I know that it's sort of around food forests and providing for their needs with the biocorridor. Could you talk a little bit about the work you're doing with them?
Yeah, well, they're not in a so the Darjeeling Hills, as you guys are, this is in India, but other people hopefully globally will see this too. It's right between, Darjeeling Hills we're just below Sikkim, right between Nepal on the west and Bhutan on the east. And it's one of India has two UN recognized biodiversity hotspots. One is the Western Ghats, the other is the Darjeeling Hills up there in Sikkim and all that. So it's hugely diverse. So there's national parks and biocorridors. This particular village is not in one of those, but it's still an amazing place. And we've been doing the course there since 2005, I think was the first time we did the course there. Oh no, we did it in a different location first 2 years, then we shifted there, probably 2007 was the first year we were there. And we've been there ever since. And it is an old tea estate that when India had independence, the owners, the Brits, just left. You know, it didn't shift over. Many of the old tea estates went, as my Bai, you know, who lives there, says, it's just sort of the white faces got replaced by the brown faces in terms of, you know, the management. It just was a shift from white to brown, and many things stayed the same. However, this estate, they just left. And so then after several years, the workers just sort of moved out and squatted on it. And then, sorry, it's sprinkling again. Oh yeah, it's going to be a good little sprinkle. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the umbrellas over the computer. It's raining on me, but that's okay. So anyway, the story is, so it's this, the cooperative. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So the whole area is known as Mineral Springs, Dabai Pani, which is actually more Medicine Springs, but it's in the translation they call Mineral Springs. And there used to be a spring down there in this area, but it has since been lost. Maybe a landslide, which is the classic catastrophe that happened during landslides. So maybe it got buried or something. But it supposedly had healing properties. That's how this area got its name, was Dabai Pani. So Mineral Springs. And so they spread out over this about 14 different villages, I think it is. And that was back in the late 50s. And in the late 60s or 70s, my Bai's father and some other local people up from Darjeeling went down there and started helping them and organizing them and into a cooperative. And over time, the tea got sort of replaced. Some of the tea was taken out, and they planted certain things like broomstick and some citrus, and they put in some gardens around. And then some of the jungle came back, and the plants they used in the jungle, the native plants or the plants that came back, if it had a function, they left it. But if it didn't, they took it out. And just so naturally, over time, they developed a forest garden. Thousands and thousands of acres of forest garden. Never hearing about permaculture, never hearing about what a forest garden is. They just sort of created it. And I'm not going to go into the whole story but up into today, now they're in this organized, the 14 villages are organized into a sangam, into a society, is what you guys would call it in, co-op for those people, but it functions as a co-op, but it's legally a society. And the whole 14 villages are under one organic standard, one organic certification. So there's a lot of internal work to keep, one farmer goes off organics, everybody loses it. So there's a lot of, self-regulation there. It was fair trade. So anyway, so it's just a beautiful place. I mean, I'm going off on it. We're in one of the villages is where we do the course, which is Ampote. And it's homestays. People stay with the local farmers. The farms are generally 1 acre to 2 acres, which is pretty typical in many places in India. So you stay with a farm family. We do the course in this little sort of the community center, as it were. It's a very small little building, but that's where we do our course. It's just sweet. It's just beautiful. And now we're starting, as you guys are part of the representatives of, now that we're getting Indian instructors and everything. So this next year, I think, so Jyoti and Malvika will be there in Darjeeling this year. And then also my buddy Reed. I'm not sure if any of you met Reed, but anyway, another American guy, he'll be over there. So, we'll have this great instructor team at this course this year. Yeah, it's just a fun, sweet place. And we had the best party. As you guys know, I like my celebrations, And at the end, after everybody's done their presentation, we have a little celebration that night. And in Darjeeling and Ampote, the whole community comes. We all come together. We have tungpa, the local, brew. We have a fire. We have, you know, I put on my music for a little while, and then the locals come and they go, put it away, and they put on their local music, and then everybody's up dancing, and it's just like, it's just brilliant. It's just so, yeah, that's the longest running course in Asia, of, you know, annual course in Asia. DLR Prerna. So if you look that up, you'll find it. Or if you can put, my website isn't quite as functional. You can put up my email if you want to, in terms of the credits or anything for people. If they are interested in that course, they can write to me. It'll be this year. It's going to be, we always do that course just after, oh, hello. Sorry, you guys didn't see that in terms of people watching this, but that was,
No, that happens.
yeah, it happens. So yeah, so the Darjeeling course happens always after Diwali. So it's, I think, the 21st of November, because Diwali this year coming up, I think, is November 14th, a Sunday actually, or Saturday. So we're starting it on the 21st, Saturday, 21st of November. So that's this coming year, but it's always the week after Diwali is when we do the Darjeeling course. So you can write to me or look up DLR Prerna and write to them if you're interested in the course, and I hope you come. And it's very affordable. We keep it very affordable, best we can. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I think we've come to almost to the end of the interview. Any people or projects that you'd like to make people aware of? Any books, videos, podcasts, anything that you'd like to recommend?
Well, I mentioned, I really like this podcast I've gotten into called
Extra Environmentalist.
Yeah, Extra Environmentalist. And it's, I don't know if they're current now or not. I sent you some links for them. If you look them up, they were available on iTunes. They did have a website you could go to. The podcasts are free. They just have some really interesting guests, and I find them very entertaining. They actually do some pretty good humor. They do little skits, you know, to break the interviews up. And they can be anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. They're podcasts. And, you know, they do these little, you know, it's all, you know, no visual. I don't know. They're actually doing visuals too. They're based in, one's in the US, one's in Canada. And they were back in 2011, 2013, and all that. They went to North American permaculture convergences. They did interviews there. They started doing video. I'm working my sequentially up, but it ends around 2016 or 2015 is the last one I have. So I don't know how, I haven't been online to check them. But that's a good one. Other than that, I'm not too up on podcasts. In terms of projects, well, India's starting to do that. You know, you guys are starting to really take off on a lot of this stuff. You know, you got a lot of, we mentioned Malvika and her farm down in Bandipur. Jyoti up in Mumbai is doing some great stuff, you know, working up there. You guys are doing, you know, I'm just so amazed at Ananas and all what you guys are doing. There's in Delhi, there's Ranjot and Gurov are doing work up there. You might have to look if you want to post up their connection or their things. I'm sure you guys can get it. You know all of these folks I'm mentioning. Prerna, of course, they're my buddies and my family up there in Darjeeling. They're doing a lot of good work up in that region. Amazing stuff. I'm so inspired by the work they do up there. And sort of Timbuktu, I just wanted to mention Duhita and Timbuktu and Kailasam. That's the other project. I have 2 projects I'm working on now in terms of besides my teaching, my project work. Kailasam, as you guys know, and that farm school of agriculture for village youth, and training them up in permaculture and biodynamics, organic farming, and having them hopefully stay in the village and develop more regenerative farms and things like that. So that's an amazing project. And then the new one we're working on, Ranjot and myself, is designing the school up at One Earth, which is sort of a regenerative design institute. Our client hasn't set the name, and we're just in the design phase of the school, but it'll also be a whole institute school training. So this is really great. I think that in terms of India, and the projects that excite me are these hubs. creating these schools, creating these nodes, to use a good permaculture word, and biological and many other uses of the word, but these points where people can go to as resources for learning, for connections, for access to technologies, or learning about technologies, or learning about ideas, to go for courses and all that. So the two, like I said, one's outside Pune, this new one, the Regenerative Design Institute we're working on, and then the one down there, we mentioned the School of Agriculture for village youth.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I hope more and more of these sorts of schools start popping. I mean, like, it's just a wonderful thing that's happening now with the farm school. And yeah. Let's hope this is just the beginning.
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's, as we say, that's the way nature works. Nature creates a point, and from that point it grows out like a seed. The classic, you plant a seed and you get a forest, basically. So, and you have this little seed, and then you get an amazing tree, which is a whole community. And so that's what we need to do as permaculturalists. We need to go around and plant these seeds. Ananas of, Regenerative Design Institute, School of Agriculture, and all these different points, and plant these little seeds and get these seeds nurtured and grow them. And then from there, ripple out, sort of the way the things ripple out and expand. So yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, that's what we'll keep going around planting seeds, all of us. Then.
Yeah, and that you asked me about this class and teaching. That sort of, for me, and you guys just sort of give me so much, hope in my heart and my being, just to see you guys out there doing the work. It's like every course is just like, okay, here's all these little seeds out there. I get these 20 seeds. And just trying to give them a little water, a little shit, give them a bit of shit, give them a bit of water, and let's see what they can do.
It's amazing. I mean, there are so many students of yours in India. It's. I mean, I don't even know the number. I'm sure it's like in 4 digits or 3 digits or. What is it? Would there be? Is there any advice for them from your side?
Just do something. It's like everybody has a different passion. You have to follow your heart. I can't tell you what to do. You have to figure out what to do. I just want you to do friggin' something, That's all I ask. You have to follow your heart. If you live in the city and your passion is sort of like, working with women in the city, follow that. Do something there. If your passion is, out in the garden, you're out in the wilderness, do that. Whatever it is, I don't care. Is just do something and apply regenerative, holistic, person-to-person, heart-to-heart approach, and don't worry about making mistakes. Start simple, do this, try it, see what happens, and then build on your successes. Don't worry about making mistakes. We're friggin' human. We're going to make mistakes. Don't worry. You're not going to get it perfect. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Do the best you can. Be careful, be thoughtful, watch what happens, and then expand. Start small, figure it out, and then grow. Follow your heart. What makes you happy? Do it. Take a step. And what I was thinking is, I've taught all these people, and that's true. If every one of those persons actually did what we just talked, we'd be so much farther ahead. And I'm not judging them, because everybody has a life, and this life we live in is super challenging, and there's these dominant paradigms that puts all these pressures on us, and there's all these other things. So I'm not judging them, and when I say this, at the same time, if everybody was doing something that went through our course, if everybody who did a course that you guys are doing and other people are doing, if every one of our students actually just took a step, man, would things start changing. If everybody just took a step, it'd be amazing.
We're definitely really grateful to you for all the huge amount of guidance you've given us. And you're the one who's really, you've helped us so much with taking a step and when we've made mistakes and, guided us. And so, yeah, it's really, we're super happy that you could come on this podcast and talk to us about, and that we could see your home and see where you are. And hopefully we'll meet in person soon. Yeah.
Yes, hopefully, inshallah, soon, within the year. Yeah, and I love to spout and talk, so it's like plus to have you guys here in my home as digitally here at my home, it was nice. I wish I could have offered something to drink, but that'd been a little bit of a challenge. But yeah, no, it's I appreciate the opportunity, and it's good to see you guys.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you so much, Rico.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Cut.
Cut.